Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Now, what happened after the Second World War? Okay. Now people became very convinced in India that they would not rest till freedom was won. Okay. So between 1945 to 1946, there was numerous strikes, hartals, agitations and demonstrations against the government. Okay. There were also protests from not only the civilians but also from those who were in the military services, like in the army, in the navy, etc. Okay. So in February 19th, 1945, some units of the Royal Indian Navy, they revolted in Bombay Harbour against the British. Now the next day, this instance of some naval officers protesting in Bombay, that spread to Kochi and Karachi harbors. Alright, and there also the people protested against the British officers. In February 21st of the same year, over 1,000 men in the Royal Air Force, they also called for a strike. Okay, as a protest against the British officers and the British government. Alright, so similar protests also were seen from the police and the bureaucracy department, people who worked in the offices, in the government offices and worked for the government, as well as who were in the police department. Now it was very clear that if the nationalist demands were not met, the situation would become explosive. Now the British government could see that things were getting out of hand, and if the nationalist demands were not met, then things would become very worse. Okay, so this allowed the British attitude to change. Now they had to change their attitude. They could not be as they were, as determined to crush the people like they were during the Quit India movement. They could not be like that. Okay, and there were already sections of British people who did not believe in prolonging British control over India. There were already certain people among the British communities in Britain who believes that now the British government should not go on maintaining or strengthening its control over India and Indians. Okay. And Britain also, after the Second World War, had become economically and militarily weak. The war had drained them financially, okay, had drained them militarily as well. And there were also opinions worldwide. Okay, so for example, countries like USA, Soviet Union, they were in favor of India's independence, and they started to put pressure on the British government to provide freedom to India. All right. So in 1945, England began to haste the process of withdrawal of the British power from India. So by the mid 1945, the British government had realized that now they have to start the process of their withdrawal from India. Okay. Now a cabinet mission after that was sent under Sir Pethick Lawrence. Okay, and the main aim was to negotiate with the Indian leaders the terms for the transfer of power to Indians. Now the British transfer of power to Indians was final, right? Now the British government was going to transfer the power and transfer the control to Indians. Now Indians would control their country and the people and have complete authority over it. Okay. Now the cabinet mission was to discuss how this was to be done. Okay. Now it made some proposals. It proposed that the provinces should be divided into 3 sections, A, B and C. The A was to be a Hindu majority province and B and C Muslim majority province in the northwest as well as in the northeast. Okay, they would have the powers to set up intermediate level executives and legislatures of their own. So these provinces A, B and C, they would appoint or they would set up their own executive and legislative bodies. Okay. Now there were other princely states as well, right? So the princely states were to retain all subjects and powers other than those ceded to the union. Okay. The cabinet proposed the establishment of a constituent assembly based on the principle that the center would control only three subjects, that is, foreign affairs, defense, and communication, and all other subjects to be administered by autonomous provinces and princely states. And it also proposed that a constituent assembly was to be set up. Okay, and this should be set up on the principle that the central government would control foreign affairs, defense and communication, and all other departments were to be administered autonomously by the provinces and princely states. All right. So the plan, the cabinet mission aimed to maintain national unity while providing regional autonomy. It provided regional autonomy and it also tried to provide national unity. Alright. Initially, all major political parties accepted the cabinet mission. Okay. But this agreement did not last long because both the Congress and the Muslim League, they were not in agreement with the division of the provinces, like the separation of province A, B, C. Alright, they did not like that. In July 1946, elections were held to form Constituent Assembly, and this would frame the Constitution of Free India. Alright. Now in this election again, the Congress won maximum majority seats, 205 seats, and the Muslim League secured only 73. Okay. In August 12th, the Viceroy invited Jawaharlal Nehru to form an interim government at the center. So an interim government was to be set up in the meantime. Okay. The Muslim League refused and decided to start direct action to achieve Pakistan. Now the Muslim League did not like this and they decided to start something called direct action. And this action's main aim was to create or demand for the creation of Pakistan. Okay, or achieve the homeland for Muslims, which is Pakistan. Now, Jinnah demanded that the British should partition the country and leave it. Okay, Jinnah kept on demanding for the partition of India, and before the British left India, Jinnah suggested that the British should divide the country. Okay, partition the country. Jinnah fixed August 16, 1946 as the day of observance of direct action. So this was the day when creation of such partition was to be met. Okay. Now, with the announcement of this day, there was cases of violence which occurred in Calcutta and Sylhet, and riots between Muslims and Hindus also broke out in Bihar, which is adjacent to Bengal. Mahatma Gandhi and national leaders toured East Bengal and Bihar on foot to put out the fire of communal hatred, but to no avail. Mahatma Gandhi and other Indian national leaders, they went to all the places which had witnessed riots, occurrence of violences between the two communities, Hindus and Muslims, but their efforts were to no avail. There was nothing much that they could do. There was not much they could do. Okay, so the gulf, the divide between the two communities, the Hindus and the Muslims, widened. Okay, and this happened right before the actual partition of the country. Here we look at Bengal and the partition of India. Alright, we look at some of the provinces and how it was impacted by the partition. So when the Direct Action Day was announced by the Muslim League, Bengal declared it a public holiday. The Muslim League branch of the Muslim League in Bengal, they declared that day as a holiday. Now then the riots broke out in Calcutta, and then it saw loss of life or lot of people dying, or lot of people. So it saw thousands of people dying in the streets and thousands of people being massacred. All right. Now this riot, it spread to the nearby province Bihar, and then in 1947 Bengal was partitioned into West and East Bengal. Now when this partition took place, it uprooted millions of people from their homes, from their properties, and they were forced to move to the other side of the border, leaving their family, friends, their property, everything. All right. Now let us look what happened in Punjab. Now in Punjab, with the election of 1946, the Muslim League managed to get 79 seats out of 175. They were still a minority. Alright, so they came in terms with the Sikh and the Congress for the formation of ministry. But the League did not want to be present in such a coalition. Alright. Now when direct action resolution was passed in Bombay, so just like in Calcutta, the riots moved from Calcutta to Punjab. Okay. Now there was a tense situation that developed in Punjab. This tense situation between the communities that lived in Punjab. Okay. In February 1947, the British government announced its decision to transfer the power to the Indian hands by June 1948. Now it was evident that the power would be passed on to the Muslim majority, because in that area the Muslim were in majority. Okay, so Khizar ministry, which was the representative of the Congress party, could not any longer hope to get solution to the violence and riots that were breaking out there. Okay, so he resigned from his position because he could not handle the situation anymore. Now the league tried to form a ministry, but it failed to do so. With that, the government took over the ministry. The government took over the province Punjab under Section 93 of the Government of India Act of 1935. Now next day, a serious riot broke out in Lahore and it spread to other places including Amritsar, Rawalpindi and Jalandhar. So you can see the situation in Punjab right on the eve of partition was extremely tense. Now, Congress was convinced by this time that there was no way out except for partitioning India. Okay, it was convinced that the tension had developed to that extent that there was no way to resolve it. Alright, on 3rd June 1947, Lord Mountbatten, the Governor General, announced a plan for the partition of provinces of Bengal and Punjab. So Lord Mountbatten decided and announced his decision for the partition of Bengal and Punjab. Okay. Now this was accepted by Congress, the Muslim League and the Akalis, the Sikh military force, the group in Punjab. The government of India appointed a boundary commission with Lord Redcliffe as the chairman and Mr. Justice Meher Chand Mahajan, Mr. Justice Teja Singh, Mr. Justice Muhammad Munit and Mr. Justice Din Muhammad as its members. Alright. Now the members of the commission, they were of different opinions. They did not have a consensus. They all did not arrive at a conclusion. Okay. So because of this, the chairman of the boundary commission, he on the basis of his own understanding and liking partitioned between India and Pakistan. He drew the boundary according to his own knowledge and understanding. So in June 3rd, 1947, the plan for establishment of two separate dominions of India and Pakistan was announced by Lord Mountbatten. He also said that the date for withdrawal of the British from India was not to be in June 1948 but August 15, 1947. Okay. Now this was accepted both by the Congress as well as the Muslim League. And by the Indian Independence Act of 1947, two independent dominions of India and Pakistan were born, okay, in 1947, August 15th. Now the provinces of Sindh, Balochistan and Northwest Frontier Province, they joined Pakistan. But Bengal and Punjab were partitioned between the two states. The provinces of Bengal and Punjab in the east as well as in northwest, they were partitioned into two to form the new state of Pakistan. Alright. So we already know that the boundary commissions under the chairmanship of Sir Cyril Ratcliffe demarcated these boundaries between the provinces of Punjab and Bengal. So, in August 15, 1947, India and Pakistan emerged as two independent states, as well as there was creation of a new state of Pakistan with the partition of the province of Punjab and Bengal. And with that, there was an end to the British rule in India. Lord Mountbatten became the first Governor General of Free India, and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the leader of the Muslim League, became the first Governor General of Pakistan. Okay. Now there were princely states as well. So these princely states were given free choice of joining either of the two states. They were free to join either India or Pakistan. About 500 princely states readily joined India. Okay, and the states of Junagadh, Hyderabad, Jammu and Kashmir, they joined India later. This partition of India and independence of India was followed by unprecedented large-scale mass murders, arson, cases of abduction, rape, forced transfer of population, more than 500,000 of deaths, and over 12 million people were made homeless. Okay, so this was the effect of the partition and independence that occurred in August 15th, 1947. So with that, we move on to the next topic, and here we'll try to understand why did the British leave and why did India partition. Now, anti-British movements had begun since the revolt of 1857, right? And it continued up to 1942, where all these movements were determined, where all these movements were severely crushed by the British, and the British government was increasingly determined to crush these anti-British movements, okay? So the leaders of the movements, all these movements that took place between 1857 to 1942, they suffered heavily. Some of them lost their lives, some of them were injured, some of them were injured for many years, imprisoned for many years, right? So they suffered, and the movement also suffered alongside. But the British attitude changed after the Second World War, okay? They realized that they have to now quit India and they have to transfer the power to the people of India. Okay, so such realizations begin to come. Now, what were the reasons behind these realizations which led to the British government finally transferring the power to the Indian leaders and bringing an end to colonial rule? So some of the reasons were, number one, intense desire of Indians for freedom. So the freedom movement of the Indians led by the Indian National Congress, it became intensified over the years. Okay, so the Indians now became extremely desperate in their fight to gain freedom and independence from the British rule. The second reason is that the Second World War had drained Great Britain and the British government financially, and it had also drained them militarily. They had lost lots of thousands of people, soldiers in the fight, in the war, and they had also spent huge amount of money in the war efforts. Okay, so they had become financially and militarily weak. Number three is that progressive movements in Asia, like anti-British movement led by the Indian National Congress, these were already beginning to appear and occur in Asia. Okay, so these were new trends where the people were fighting against their colonial rule, when the people now no longer wanted to be under the subjugation control of the colonial foreign rule. Okay. Number fourth is that favorable opinion, public opinion in England. Now the attitude in England was also changing among the British. Now the British had slowly started to realize and grown to be sympathetic towards the demand of the Indians. Okay, they had now understood that now the Britain or the British government is or should leave India and should transfer the power to the Indians, okay, and help establish a responsible government for Indians to rule themselves and their people. So such change in attitude also caused the British government to leave India. The next reason is that keeping India under bondage was now no more profitable. Okay, now India earlier was a huge market for the British finished goods. Okay, but now India was doing financially, economically, and industrially also quite well. So now India was no longer a market, open market for the British. The British goods had no demand or very less demand in the Indian markets. So economically, which earlier was one of the main reasons why India was colonized by the British government, now that also was no longer feasible. Okay, that was no longer applicable. So it was no more profitable for the British government to keep India under the control. Now there was also fear of communism. Okay, so while the movements against the British, the Indian nationalist movements against the British was taking place, alongside that there were also farmers, there were also workers who were rising up, raising their voices against the British, fighting against the British. Now that also caused alarm to the British government. So they could no longer handle all those developments. Okay. The seventh was spread of national movement to princely states. Now, princely states were out of these provinces, these main provinces in British India. Now, these princely states were also impacted by the increasing nationalist feeling and the struggle for freedom against the British rule. So the princely states had also started to participate, and there was also a spread of national movement or national sentiments in the princely states. All right, and another reason is that there was also a substantial international pressure that was building and that was being applied on Britain, so that Britain leaves India and lets Indians to rule themselves. Okay, like for example, USSR, Soviet Union, and USA, United States of America, had started to apply pressure on Britain so that Britain or British government leaves or provides or gives freedom or allows freedom to gives freedom to the Indian leaders or India. Okay. The next reason is that there were doubts about the loyalty of Indian armed force. Now we already know that over time the Indian officers, Indian soldiers who were in the military services, British military services, Royal Air Force, Royal Naval Force, all these and the police department, all these services were also impacted by the growing nationalist fervor and the fight against the British government. So now the British could no longer trust their servicemen. The British could no longer say that the Indian armed forces were loyal to them. Okay, so this doubt also caused them, was one of the reasons. The next reason is that the advent of Labour government in India, in Britain. Now, of course, we already said that there was a change of attitude among the British in England, in Britain, and with the coming up of the Labour government in Britain, this change in attitude and their sympathetic attitudes towards the Indians' demand for freedom also materialized. Okay, because with the coming of the Labour government and coming of Sir Clement Attlee, the process of transfer of power quickened and India received independence. Okay, so those were the causes which helped Britain to convince themselves, or the British government to realize that now it was time for them to leave. Now let us look at some of the causes of India's partition. Okay, what caused India to partition? Now, the first cause was the policy of divide and rule, which the British government followed. So it divided communities and it ruled on such policies. This led to conflict between communities and that led to partition. The second reason is Jinnah's policy of two-nation theory, which advocated the idea that Hindus and Muslims were two separate nations and they cannot live together. The third cause was the British government's policy of appeasement towards the Muslims. So Muslims were appeased by the British at the cost of the Congress. So this also led to India's partition. Various missions sent by the British government to solve the Indian problem indirectly accept the British demand of Pakistan. So many missions were sent to India to sort out the problems, disagreements, conflicts between the British government on one side, the Indian National Congress on the other side, and the Muslim League on the other side, and other political leaders. But despite all these missions being sent and discussions and conferences being held, indirectly the British government was always accepting the Muslim demand for the creation of Pakistan. Okay. And also there was failure of interim government. Okay, so all these led to the partition of India in 1947. So with that we move on to the next topic, and in this topic we look at the riot torn areas and the role of Gandhiji, and also how some groups of people in the society were impacted by the partition, like the women folk. How were the women impacted by partition or independence or the freedom struggle? Okay. Now, when violence and communal riots broke out, Gandhiji did not sit quiet. Gandhiji made extreme efforts to bring communal harmony between the Muslims and the Hindus. Okay. Now, in order to do that, he walked from village to village. Okay, he walked in various districts in various states across the country. Like for example, he walked in the village of Noakhali in East Bengal, which is in present-day Bangladesh. And as he walked around the village, as he toured, he pled for peace and brotherhood. He went and spoke to the people and he requested people to live in harmony, to maintain peace and maintain brotherhood amongst each other. Okay. Now, as the riot spread to Bihar from Bengal, he went there as well. Okay, and with the same message, he went there and pled the people there as well. And from there, as the riot spread to Delhi, he went to Delhi. He made efforts to stop the Hindus and Muslims to kill each other. Okay, he assured, as he was pleading the people to maintain peace and brotherhood and to stop killing each other, he also assured the minorities who were much more vulnerable full protection. Okay, he assured that they would be provided protection by the government. When the Muslims in East Bengal massacred Hindus in October 1946, Gandhiji visited the area on foot and appealed to the local Muslims to guarantee the safety of Hindus. So he went to areas where the Muslims attacked the Hindus. Alright, so he went to those areas and then he requested the Muslims to maintain peace and to also allow provide safety to the Hindus. Okay. And in other places such as Delhi, he made efforts to build a spirit of mutual trust between the two communities. Okay, so he did his very best to ensure that there was harmony and peace between the two communities, and the riots and the conflicts between the two communities were erased. Okay, were stopped. Okay. And apart from that, apart from touring, Gandhiji also undertook a fast so that a change could be brought in the hearts of the people and harmony could be established. Peace and harmony could be established. Now let us look at how the women experienced, what were the experience of women during this time, during the time of partition. Okay, so we'll look at the experience of women in Northwest India. Women there had harrowing experiences, horrible experiences, okay? They were abducted, raped, sold, forced to settle down with strangers, okay? And both the governments in Pakistan and India, they did not care for these complexities of human relations. How women were forcefully taken by some men with them and made to settle with them. How women were raped. All these were not properly taken care of by the governments in Pakistan and India. Okay. Some women were left on the wrong side of the borders of the two countries. Some women were made to go to the other side of the border. Okay, they were torn from their families, and others were forcibly sent to their places and homes. Okay, the government did not care to consult with the women, and the government did not try to understand the problems faced by the women. Okay, so the government denied them the right to take the decisions regarding their own lives. The government played zero role in making sure that the women who were impacted, whose lives were impacted by partition, were protected, were provided safety, and were allowed to make their own decisions. All right. It is estimated that 3,000 women were recovered, okay, were brought back. 22,000 Muslim women in India and 8,000 Hindu and Sikh women in Pakistan in an operation that continued up to late 1954. So these women were brought back. Okay, but we don't know if they were forcibly brought back or if they wanted to remain there or if they wanted to come. You know, all these were not taken care by the governments at both sides. Okay. Now, there was another idea which floated during this time, and the ideas were of preserving community honor. Okay, and this became a very popular idea that floated during this time. Now, this idea of preserving community honor, this was based on their idea of ownership of Zan, which is women, and Zameen, which is land. This is a very old idea which were present in the North Indian peasant societies, the ideas of the ownership of Zameen and Jam. Okay. Now, according to this idea, the possessions which were Jan and Jameen, the women and land, were to be protected from being taken away by outsiders. So they were to be protected. Okay, they were not to be taken by outsiders. So when the men feared that their women, wives, daughters, sisters were going to be violated by the enemy, okay, by the enemy of the other communities, they killed the women themselves. That is what the idea of Zan and Zameen allowed them to do. Okay, so in the village of Thoa Khalsa, 90 women are said to have voluntarily jumped into a well rather than to fall into the hands of the enemy. That's what the women thought. It's better to die than to hand themselves to the enemies. Okay, to the ones who were coming to abduct them, rape them, assault them. And some men also persuaded the women to kill themselves. Okay, they said kill yourselves rather than being raped by forcibly taken by the others. Okay, the men themselves encouraged the women to do so. Now these killings of women by themselves, by jumping into the well, by killing themselves, by stabbing themselves, these were not considered suicides, but rather these were considered as martyrdoms. Okay, so these women were considered martyrs, all right, and they are celebrated in the areas from where these incidents from where these incidents occurred. Okay, now let's look at Bengal and how it was impacted by partition. Like Punjab, Bengal was also partitioned between India and Pakistan, East Bengal and West Bengal. Okay, the two provinces had different experience. The provinces of Punjab and Bengal had different experiences. In Bengal, the migration was even more protracted. Now, the migration, the movement of people from one side of the border to the other side when the partition took place, right? That migration continued. But compared to Punjab, the migration in Bengal continued for a long time. People continued to move back and forth. All right. And secondly, unlike Punjab, the exchange of population in Bengal was not total. And unlike Punjab, okay, where most of the people moved from one side of the border to the other, but in Bengal, not all moved from one side of the other, okay, from one side of the border to the other. Like for example, when the Muslims from Bengal, when large number of Muslims were moving from present day West Bengal to East Bengal, then created East Bengal, now present day Bangladesh, not all Muslims fled to Bangladesh. Some of them continue to remain in Bengal. Similarly, even in East Bengal, okay, from East Bengal, not all Hindus move to West Bengal. Some Hindus continue to remain in East Bengal. So this was a unique feature of Punjab, Bengal, okay, in comparison to Punjab. Lastly, the Bengali Muslims rejected Jinnah's two-nation theory through political action, and in Bengal, one of the unique feature is that here the Muslims did not agree with Jinnah's two-nation theory. Okay, and how we can understand is that in 1971-72, a war was fought, and then Bangladesh was born, and it broke away from Pakistan. So East Pakistan broke away from Pakistan, and a new nation was born, and that was called Bangladesh. Okay. But despite these differences between the province of Bengal and Punjab and how they were impacted by the partition, the similarities that we see in both the cases is how the women and girls were targeted during this event. Okay, the women and girls were equally persecuted in both the provinces. They were raped, they were abducted, they were forcefully taken by strangers, they were assaulted, etc. Okay. Now let's look at the reaction to partition in other areas. Now other areas also suffered equally, all right, not in great extent as in Bengal and in Punjab, but it wasn't less. All right. So many Muslim families in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, they migrated to Pakistan. So the movement was not only between East Bengal and West Bengal, East Punjab and West Punjab, but it was also between Pakistan and the whole of India as well. Okay, and this migration of people, it continued through 1950s and early 1960s. So you can imagine it began from 1947 and went on to 1960s. All right. Now during this challenging time, during this horrific time, Alright, during this unfortunate time, there were people who provided help and who made sure that people were given help, people were given food, shelter, protection, safety, etc. So one of those people who provided immense amount of help during this tiring time, during this challenging time, is Khushdev Singh. Okay, Khushdev Singh was a doctor posted in Dharmapur. Okay, and when people were migrating and when people were in distress and they lost everything, these people, the refugees, were provided food, shelter, love, and security to as many as these people that Khushdev could help. Okay, so Khushdev or other people like Khushdev provided great help for the migrants who were victims of the partition.